Let me tell you the absolute surest and most decisive way for Moscow to permanently erase its status as a global superpower by its own hand. The time is 1200 hours. The stage, the Strait of Hormuz, the most dangerous waters on Earth. Shattering the silence, a violent, ear-piercing electronic scream echoes across the sea. The Russian Navy frigate Stoiky is charging straight at the $13 billion U.S. Navy supercarrier, the USS Gerald R. Ford, as if provoking a suicidal game of chicken. The distance, a mere 1,500 feet. By any standard of military common sense, this is an insanely dangerous and abnormal approach. In that very moment, inside the Ford's Combat Directions Center, the world is bathed in blood-red warning lights. Every radar system has been completely jammed and neutralized. Their lifeline, the GPS signals, has vanished without a trace into the pitch-black void of a total cyber blackout. Even more terrifying, swarming around the carrier strike group are 50 Iranian suicide attack boats, buzzing like a hive of enraged hornets and laying down a deadly, suffocating siege line. If this state-of-the-art supercarrier were to collide with that cold, unforgiving mass of Russian steel, it wouldn't just be a tragic maritime accident. Before the first victim's body even touched the cold ocean surface, global energy markets would completely collapse, and the world as we know it would be erased. You are standing at the cruel crossroads of history, staring down a massive, global-scale conflict, and you absolutely cannot miss the tactical masterstroke that is about to flip the entire board upside down, because in these deadly waters, the true nightmare is still hiding its horrific face beneath the surface. Right now, the global economy is quietly but surely bleeding out at the bottom of the Persian Gulf. By the dawn of 2026, the desperate alliance forged between Moscow and Tehran has transformed the Strait of Hormuz into a geopolitical powder keg ready to blow at any second. Moscow's motive is crystal clear. To distract the world from their quagmire in Ukraine, they desperately need a second front, a brand new flashpoint. Tehran, on the other hand, is wielding its overwhelming geographical advantage as a massive strategic sledgehammer to smash international economic sanctions. And they aren't just patrolling these waters, they are scheming to forcefully build an illegal toll booth right at the most critical and delicate gateway on the planet. Imagine this strait as the incredibly narrow driveway leading to the wealthiest, most exclusive neighborhood in the world. A staggering 20% of the world's daily oil consumption flows through here without rest. Russia and Iran genuinely believe they can completely blockade this vital economic lifeline. You'll force the West to its knees and extort a massive toll disguised as diplomatic concessions. By using a single isolated weapons platform like the frigate Stoiky to smokescreen a multi-billion-dollar state-level extortion racket, they are executing an absolute masterclass in gray zone warfare. The time is 12:15 hours. This narrow strait transforms into a hyperspeed collision course toward doom. The Russian frigate Stoiky suddenly executes a hard turn. It's initiating another furious charge toward the massive USS Gerald R. Ford, closing the gap to just 1,500 feet once again. At the exact same moment, the Russian bridge activates a high-gain radar jammer. The entire airspace is instantly suffocated by an impenetrable, invisible wall of intense electromagnetic white noise. This is a brutally violent attack designed to physically destroy both visual and electronic eyes. But Moscow's calculation is this: by making such an abnormally close approach and completely blinding the Ford's legendary Aegis system, they are convinced they can make the 100,000-ton American giant flinch and yield the right of way. It is an incredibly dangerous game of chicken, but the United States Navy doesn't blink. Moving flawlessly as a single beating heart, the crew of the Ford instantly executes a strict radio emission protocol known as MCON Alpha. This supercarrier completely shuts down all of its own radio communications, radar waves, and digital pulses. The US Navy completely vanishes from the electromagnetic spectrum, transforming the most expensive military structure ever built into a 1,100-foot invisible ghost hiding inside the machine. While the Russian crew smirks behind their electronic screens, wholly believing the massive American carrier is paralyzed in the dark, the US Navy has already made its next move. They are quietly executing a spectral dissection in the unseen realm. The Ford's crew has silently brought high-resolution infrared and thermal sensors online. Incredibly, they have an overwhelming, crystal-clear 4K view of everything, from the exact thermal signature radiating off the Stoiky's engine room right down to the tense, microscopic movements of the Russian sailors on the bridge. Moscow brought an outdated, giant megaphone to a silent battlefield ruled by digital X-ray vision. If seeing American radar screens go dark, they fall falsely believe they have won. They have no idea that in this very second, the US Navy is completely auditing the mechanical heartbeat of their ship, stripping it bare. The ultimate network, known as the System of Systems, doesn't need to scream to see the world around it. The time is 12:30 hours, right as the Stoichi plays its dazzling game of digital smoke and mirrors. Tehran unleashes a terrifying swarm from the jagged limestone caves lining the coast. 50 Zulfiqar-class fast attack craft come tearing across the water at an astonishing 70 knots. But their true target isn't a direct assault on the American fleet. The Iranian Wolfpack violently zigzags through the narrow gaps between a line of colossal 300,000-ton civilian supertankers. Tehran is using civilian vessels as a massive living firewall. They know exactly how strict the US. So Navy rules of engagement are, if the Navy fires into this swarm, it risks triggering a catastrophic, irreversible, massive crude oil spill. It could turn the Persian Gulf into a giant sea of fire and completely collapse the global economy. This American giant possesses overwhelming power, but it is effectively handcuffed by its own high moral standards and rules. And from 35,000 feet, high above this maritime chaos, Moscow injects another bird of death into the complex equation. As a Russian Tu-95 Bear bomber begins slowly circling overhead. Its long-range K-1 cruise missiles are already armed. The Kremlin is intentionally broadcasting a massive radar cross-section, forcibly making the Ford's Aegis system look up. This is the terrifying vertical pressure they've orchestrated. If the US Navy directs its digital eyes toward the high-altitude bomber, the swarm crawling along the surface will fire a barrage of short-range torpedoes into the tankers. If the Navy focuses on the boat swarm, the bomber above will rain down a supersonic payload from the stratosphere. Moscow and Tehran have created the perfect dilemma to tear American fire control systems in half. They are convinced they have finally backed Uncle Sam into the ultimate corner. But just as the Russian pilot rests his finger on the missile trigger, he fails to realize that he too is being perfectly monitored by an entirely different eye. The time is 1300 hours. So Moscow and Tehran orchestrate the ultimate digital execution. The jugular of the world is finally swallowed by pitch black darkness. This is a complete, exhaustive GPS spoofing attack. Russia's elite intelligence units have injected a completely synthesized fictional reality deep into the nervous system of the American navigation network. On the Ford's tactical displays, every ship in the strike group appears to be sailing in flawless perfect formation. But the physical reality is entirely different. Blinded by this digital lie, the Fifth Fleet is being unknowingly dragged into a fatal collision course with those 300,000-ton supertankers. Inside the Combat Direction Center of an Arleigh-Burke-class destroyer, the cutting-edge screens show a clear, obstacle-free ocean surface, but a blood-curdling scream rips from the lookout's standing watch on the bridge. So what their naked eyes have caught is a massive wall of rust-covered steel suddenly tearing through the thick fog, looming right in front of them. The distance, less than 200 yards. Collision alarms howl through the ship. The 300 sailors on board have exactly 15 seconds to prevent an absolute apocalypse. Kremlin tech advisors lean over their remote consoles, waiting for the definitive accident that will frame the US. It's a Navy as a reckless aggressor and ignite the entire Persian Gulf into a sea of fire. But the US Navy doesn't dance on fake maps drawn by its enemies. With the GPS system feeding them fatal lies, the American sailors instantly perform a digital lobotomy on their own navigation systems. They don't need to rely on satellites floating in space. They have an absolutely unshakable inertial lock. By leveraging ring laser gyroscopes that precisely track the rotational movement of the Earth itself and the pull of gravity, the System of Systems completely bypasses this digital fog. They purge the spoofed data from their systems entirely, instantly switching to a pure inertial navigation system that is absolutely impossible to jam. The destroyer executes a violent, bone-crushing emergency turn. Its massive 100,000 horsepower engines scream in miraculously dodging the giant tanker by a hair's breadth of just 50 feet. Moscow tried to bring a digital hallucination to an absolute fight against the laws of physics, and now they are slapped with the cold, hard reality that you absolutely cannot fake the weight of 9,000 tons of American steel. The giant named America didn't stumble in the dark. They simply acquired a completely new set of eyes. This symphony of darkness orchestrated by Moscow and Tehran was supposed to be the US. Navy's Requiem. Instead, it became just another chapter of technical humiliation. The time is 13:30 hours. Realizing that Washington dodged the trap, the elite Russian intelligence team pivots from high-tech tactics and pulls the trigger on a highly low-tech mesh network spanning all 50 Iranian fast-attack boats. They switch to an atmospheric bounce communication method using the jagged limestone cliffs of the coastline to physically bounce low-frequency analog radio signals. Well, this is an incredibly dirty signal, intentionally buried deep within the noise of local radio broadcasts. Moscow is convinced that this noise-riddled frequency is the one sacred sanctuary that the US would never jam, but they've made a fatal miscalculation. The US Navy follows only one rule: the absolute domination of the electromagnetic spectrum. Enter the EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft. Two Growlers launch from the USS Abraham Lincoln and punch into the combat zone with a deafening roar. They are deploying advanced cognitive electronic warfare. The next generation jammer equipped on the Growler instantly identifies the precise rhythm and pattern of the mesh network built by Russia and Iran and completely subtracts it from the physical world. It creates an absolute digital vacuum. The Iranian commanders are desperately screaming into their radios. But all the crews below them here is a dead, crushing silence. The American pilots are quietly performing a hypersurgical precision erasure in the electromagnetic domain. In just 90 seconds, the 50 Iranian boats are suddenly left completely blind and deaf. Stripped of instructions, the swarm instantly loses all cohesion, splintering and fracturing as they barely avoid crashing into one another's hulls. The time is 1400 hours. Washington finally declares defense readiness condition. So DEFCON 2 and a final ultimatum is blasting over every open radio frequency. Retreat immediately, or accept your fate of being strategically erased. Yet, the leaders in Tehran and Moscow arrogantly assume the US Navy is just bluffing. They are ecstatic, believing they've finally pinned the massive American force. But they are about to learn the terrifying truth. This giant has been standing silently in their very shadows for the past 72 hours, suddenly. The deep blue water right at the midpoint between the Iranian coastline and the USS Gerald R. Ford begins to boil violently. A massive black void, an astonishing 560 feet long, bursts through the surface, violently blowing millions of gallons of ocean water into the air. This is the USS Michigan, an Ohio-class nuclear-powered guided missile submarine. Normally, this class of vessel is the ultimate ghost, designed to only reveal itself after the world has already ended. But today, she is executing the most terrifying visual intimidation tactic in the history of the Fifth Fleet. By surfacing brazenly in the center of the world's most dangerous choke point, the US Navy has completed a psychological lobotomy on the enemy leadership. The Michigan is a massive floating armory loaded with 154 Tomahawk Block 5 cruise missiles. And at this very second, every single one of those missiles is locked onto absolute death coordinates, targeting Iran's underground missile cities and hardened command bunkers. The Iranian swarm remains blinded and deafened, and now they can only stare in helpless shock at the nuclear-powered apex predator that has suddenly materialized in their own backyard. They realize they have been completely locked inside a giant titanium-clad slaughterhouse, and the US Navy is just waiting for the slightest excuse to pull the trigger. The time is 14:30 hours. The explosive tension suffocating the Strait of Hormuz finally snaps, but not with the roar of a missile, rather, with the bone-chilling silence of complete strategic collapse. Fully comprehending that every single layer of their meticulously crafted mission has been systematically and brutally dismantled, the Kremlin and Tehran issue an immediate order to retreat. Shaken, trembling Russian voices broadcast to the world that their planned regional military exercises have successfully concluded. The Russian frigate Stoiky and the surviving Iranian boats turn 180 degrees, limping back to their ports like defeated soldiers slinking away from the gallows. The US Navy doesn't chase them. They don't need a massive explosion to claim total victory. The true treasure is the staggering petabyte-scale harvest of data quietly collected by the Ford's bleeding-edge sensors. During this tense 180-minute standoff, the US Navy conducted a full-spectrum audit on the enemy forces. And they completely mastered and recorded everything, from the unique frequency hopping patterns of their latest radars to the mechanical DNA that makes up their entire coastal fleet. This entire sequence of engagements is portrayed here as a bone-chillingly realistic fictional simulation extracted from advanced digital twin wargame engines. But the overwhelming tactical supremacy demonstrated here is the absolute reality of 21st century warfare. The West The Navy isn't just training against physical targets. We are constantly training against the data itself. The ice-cold precision of our architecture is the invisible, impenetrable wall that guarantees your way of life remains stable, while hostile nations remain forever trapped in the antiquated logic of the 20th century. If you are proud of the silent warriors who put their lives on the line to fiercely protect our interests while the rest of the world sleeps peacefully, hit that like button right now and subscribe to the channel. That way you will never miss these critical high-stakes missions. Go Navy!